Hello and most welcome to 1103B, and I will make a retake of the last paragraph because it's burningly pertinent to the subject. Very important. So this is set going back a bit from when we were discussing Kalle earlier, and also in a couple of days I will rearrange microphone. I would have a better camera, so you have been patient, you will be rewarded with something that is a bit more decent. So 278, second paragraph, very important. Four pairs of opposites divide in two groups, day and night, winter and summer. Define the cosmic order of change and regularity within which human life is carried on. The last two pairs, war and peace, satiety and famine, represent extreme human experiences of disruption and restoration. But all four pairs are characterized by a common pattern, the alternation and interdependence of a positive and a negative term. Thus, war and famine represent things dangerous and destructive, while peace and satiety represent what is positive and desirable. A similar positive-negative contrast underlies the antithesis of the first group. Summer is the good season, kalokairi, fair weather in modern Greek. The ancient name theros suggests crops, whereas winter is named from storm. Hemon. Daylight stands for light, but night is the fearful power of darkness. Hence her euphemistic name, Eufrone, the kindly one, used throughout the fragments. Now the regularity of the seasons and the changing ratio of day and night was recognized as the very pattern of cosmic plan, the work of an ordering intellect. The formal symmetry of our sentence seems to make a similar point about the negative and positive extremes of human experience. So one is from a more corporal, experiential, and maybe the second pairs of oppositions are more exophysical or exogenous. But they come interestingly together here. The formal symmetry of our sentence seems to make a similar point about the negative and positive extremes of human experience. By the measure of cosmic order, peace and war, satiety and hunger are necessarily joined together within a total unity that is the God. But whereas other fragments assert the unity of a specific pair of opposites, what our sentence adds is the thesis of unity for all the pairs. Except for War and Peace, the antithesis of 123 all reappear in other fragments. The pairing of War and Peace is unique, since elsewhere war stands alone for the cosmic order. We thus recognize a duality in the role of war, which figures here as one constituent of a particular antithesis, and there as the principle of antithesis as such. Very interesting. Antithesis as such. Antithesis as such. A general antithesis. Just as we have distinguished a partial and a total conception of deity and a particular elemental and universal cosmic rule for fire, there is no one term that can designate the principle of total order without ambiguity. It would be pointless to debate whether these four pairs of opposites are to be attributed to the God as predicates or strictly identified with him as alternative descriptions. The logical dichotomy between the is of predication and the is of identity is a conceptual anachronism which does violence to the simple directness of Heraclitus's language. God is in some sense defined by or identified with the opposites here, though of course he cannot be identified with anyone or with any pair taken alone. Nor can the list be regarded as an exhaustive account of deity. The God will be strictly identical only with a total pattern of oppositions. Of which these four pairs are paradigmatic specimens. This pattern is the order of the universe. Its unifying structure as a balancing of opposites over time. The God identified in 123 is neither a physical substance nor an underlying element, nor any concrete body like elemental fire. This is obvious from the first sentence, but often forgotten in the exegesis of what follows. 2. Listen carefully. It alters when mingled with perfume. It gets named according to the pleasure of each. What is it that alters or becomes other in kind? Aloios, the God surely, but not the God as some underlying subject or substrate that could manifest itself in the opposites taken one at a time. Very important. Being actually in itself an entity distinct from them all. This substratum interpretation of 123, which is encouraged by superficial reading, of the simile of incense, as well by the Aristotelian view of Heraclitean fire as material cause, is clearly ruled out by the preceding sentence. For there is no one subject which might become first day, then night, then winter or summer, war or peace. Days and night are themselves part of and modified by summer and winter, just as they are qualified in turn by war and peace. The four pairs of opposites are in no sense alternatives to one another, as potential attributes of some one underlying subject, in the way that different fragrances may characterize a single fire. It is only between the two terms of any given pair that a change of this kind can be understood. So the verb "it alters" must refer to a change from any one term to its opposite, or more generally, to every change between opposites. This is the divine structure of cosmic process according to Heraclitus. It is the misreading of the simile to suppose that there is some process by which cosmic fire might change from day to winter, from peace to famine, or from one pair of opposites to another pair. And it is the same misreading that leads so many editors to insert fire or some other noun as subject of the clause when it's mingled with perfume. For the altar flame is, of course, distinct from the incense or spices that are thrown upon it. All the more reason why Heraclitus should have avoided here any explicit mention of fire. His simile holds not between the transformation of the god and the mingling of fire with incense, but between the different manifestations of the god and the alternative naming of the fire or of the god, in parenthesis, when so mingled. As there is one fire called by many names, so there is one divine system of unity and opposition that has just been designated by four pairs of opposites. As it stands, the subject of this clause, as of the entire second sentence, is nameless. It acquires a name only from the spices with which it's mixed, and in which the namer takes pleasure. Since the remote subject of the preceding sentence is the god, and since we are given no subject here, the text suggests that it is the god himself who appears as fire mingled with incense. The cosmic god has his epiphany in the flame burning on the altar. Once the text is corrected by the editors, we find no such mysterious identity between the universal deity and the sacrificial fire, and in no mystery at all, but a transparent and misleading simile. The final phrase, named according to the pleasure, hedone, of each, may be read in two ways. According to all the technical use of hedone for a flavor or perfume, it means simply that the unnamed fire receives the name of each spice that is added to it. But this is not the ordinary sense of hedonia. For example, in Herodotus, and even if Heraclitus alludes to this special usage here, it is difficult to believe that he meant to exclude the standard meaning of the word pleasure. On that reading, the phrase with hekasto will mean not according to the flavor of each spice, but according to the pleasure of each man, who so names it. It is not the naming of the divine by means of opposites. It is not that the naming of the divine by means of opposites is arbitrary or subjective, depending upon personal whim, but rather that the positive and negative values of opposing names are relative to human perspective and to the personal experience of the individual. Mankind perceives the contrast, the otherness, aloios, of daylight and nocturnal darkness, hunger and surfeit, but not the unity which binds each pair together, and which the same principle of antithesis throughout. It is disease, a quote here from Heraclitus, very important. It is disease that makes health sweet and good. Hunger, satiety, weariness, rest. Hippolytus tells us that 123 was found in the same section as 120 and 121. This is one of the very few cases where my arrangement of the fragments rests on documentary evidence. But Hippolytus's remark does not include 122, which I have grouped here because of its thematic link with what precedes. So 124, graspings, synapses, wholes and not wholes, convergent and divergent, consonant, dissonant, from all things one and through one thing all. I would say this is beyond philosophy. This is in a way but it's also encompassing. And I come to the realization in front of this Agios Nikolaos that there is not such a thing as contradiction in itself or per se. And I think this is something that could be led from the Milesians, the philosophers from the Ionian coast, of nature, the physicos, can lead us to think that contradictions are ruling and they are stuck somehow. So he's using contradictions to take us out of some distasteful and almost impossible grip by contradiction by itself, or antithesis in itself. It is, I would say this is beyond even Graham Priest's para-consistent logic. Goes beyond that. The form of this fragment recalls the first sentence in 123. A topic is posed by the opening word, then explicated by a series of opposing terms. But whereas the surface structure of 123 was clear, with the subject, the God, singled out by the definite article, in 124, the initial term is itself enigmatic, and we scarcely know what is being asserted of what. Both in form and content, these two fragments serve as complements to one another, providing a kind of summary of Heraclitus' thought. They might well have been placed together here at or near the end of the book. 1. As first word, and the only term not paired with an antithesis, the plural form synapsis emerges as the topic upon which the following pairs will comment. But what does this word mean? Most commentators, grouping for some clue, assign to synapsis a sense that will fit the rest of the sentence. Zusammensetzung, coming from Snell. Things taken together, from Kirk. Connections, from Markovich. Assemblages, from Bolak-Wisman. But none of these senses are attested for synapsis, Attic synapsis, in archaic or classical usage. Such renderings tend to short-circuit the process of understanding by taking as point of departure an interpretation that can only be reached by an analysis of the whole sentence. Before Aristotle, for whom the word can mean biological conception or pregnancy, the only sense attested for synapsis is the bodily notion of seizing, laying hold of, arresting, apprehending. This is still the standard meaning, in parenthesis, of the term in modern Greek. Now the cognate verb. Katalipsetai. Is twice used by Heraclitus in the sense of personal capture. If we are to take Heraclitus at his word, our interpretation must begin with the literal sense of grasping or seizure, as in the capture of someone trying to escape. Commentators have generally neglected this ordinary meaning of the word because it makes 124, very important, harder to understand. So they made a compromise, my own comment here. This is very common, but it's much more devastating for Heraclitus. In order to gain an understanding, they make a compromise, and there eludes the most important understanding. This is what Kahn is trying to set right. And he comments, but whoever supposed that Heraclitus was an easy author? Well, he's without a doubt the most complicated ever on this earth. It defies understanding. Not that he wants to reach a regular understanding, but go beyond. This is the idea with the Father. The Father cannot be reached directly. This initial sense of synapsis becomes less puzzling once we realize that 124 characterizes the structure of the universe, and remember that the structure is an order of justice involving punishment and reward. We are then free to connect the image of seizing a fugitive with other statements about the impossibility of escape. By this initial echo of the themes of fire and justice, laying hands on guilty ones, the term synapsis will recall the dimension of cosmic justice that is similarly invoked by the term antamoibe, requital, for the mutual exchange between fire and all things. Other, less usual senses of synapsis or synapsis are nonetheless essential for deciphering 124. 1. Synapsis is etymologically a taking together, a physical conjunction or concatenation of sounds or the like, as in the cognate syllabe, syllable. Synapsis can designate the cognitive act of collecting together, comprehending, or summing up. This sense of the noun is unattested in classical usage, but well represented for the corresponding verb sylambenein, to comprehend. It might easily be understood here as a recondite hyponoia. Since Snell's study of our fragment in 1941, it has been recognized that synapsis must be taken here in the sense 1 or 2. We need not choose between the two any more than we need to choose between the two sides of the action-object ambiguity, between the act of grasping and the thing's grasps. Grasping may be understood here both in the physical and in the cognitive sense, both as act and as object. Synapsis will denote the pairwise structuring of reality and also the act of intelligence by which this structure is gathered together. 2. Wholes and not wholes. It is the neuter form of these two terms, hola ke ukhola, which obliges us to go beyond the usual meaning of synapsis as seizure of a person. If it is not a question of someone being captured, what kind of apprehending is going on here? Answer: things whole and things not whole. In cognitive terms, the contrast between wholes and not wholes points to the most abstract and general feature of intellectual synthesis, combining objects in thought and seeing them together as larger unities. Of all conceptual antithesis, only the opposition of unity and plurality is of comparable generality. Compared to contrast of one and many in the final pair of 124. In the form the opposition of wholes and not wholes is even more general, since it exhibits the basic logical pattern of affirmation and denial. Yes and no. Both terms also express in the plural form the idea of the manifold as such. And in terms of semantic content, the notion of wholes indicates a subordinate diversity of parts and thus a greater richness of structure, a more organic unity than the contrast of one and many alone. We might say that the notion of the whole expresses the concept of unity as dynamic rather than static. Each unit is built up out of an internal plurality and grouped in return with some wider plurality. In the language of set theory, mängdteori, each set short of the universal set is both a whole, since it is a unit including one or more members, and not a whole, since it is not all-inclusive. The literal sense of wholeness is complete, lacking in none of its part. Strictly speaking, there can be only one whole, one unity from which nothing is lacking. Hence, to holon comes to mean the universe, but all unities short of the universe itself will be both wholes and not wholes. Beginning with the cognitive notion of bringing things together as totalities in thought, we have been led to speak of the correlative unity of structures or objects synthesized. But these structures remain general and abstract. Terms like whole and part, positive and negative, one and many, indicate purely formal features that can apply, like the concepts which Ryle has called topic neutral, to any subject matter whatsoever. Thus, there is a crucial difference of type between such abstract opposites and the more concrete substantive oppositions illustrated in 123. Day and night, summer and winter, peace and war, satiety and famine. It is in the virtue of this distinction that 124 and 123 supplement one another as a summary of the doctrine of opposites. Unlike the formal antithesis of 124, the opposites of 123 are directly instantiated in human life and in nature, like the terms of living and dead, waking and sleeping, young and old. Understood as forms of combination, synapses in the world, then terms like wholes and not wholes are logically of a higher type. We must think of them as applying to some particular substantive term, such as day or night, life or death. One can say of each day or each individual life that it is a distinct whole, with beginning, middle and end. But we can also, and even more truly, say it is not a whole, since it is only a part of some larger unity, of the diurnal circle of day and night, or the Heraclitean cycle of life and death, by which immortals live the death of mortals. Thus, the topic neutral opposites of 124 can give us a formal characterization of the view expressed in claim that day and night are one, and generalized in the statement that all things are one. 3. Convergent, divergent, very important. Intuitively, the pair of participles, sympheromenon, diapheromenon, suggests local motion, the movement of plurality together, syn in the direction of unity, balanced by the movement apart, dia, to diversity, like in dialogue, or syn, like in synergy. This spatial imagery may be taken as a figure for the dynamic tension between totality and partiality, unity and diversity, that runs through all cases of opposition. But we should also take these participles literally, as depicting an actual process of alternating motion toward unity and diversity, as in the concluding antithesis, from all things one and from one thing all. Even more unmistakable is the metaphorical sense of sympheromenon and diapheromenon as agreeing with, being advantageous to, in parenthesis, the usual sense of symphory in the active voice, end of parenthesis, and quarreling with, being hostile to. So understood, this antithesis echoes the references to agreement and conflict in so many other fragments, and specifically in 528. Quote, how in variance it agrees with itself. Recall the pairing of peace and war in 123. Peace and conflict, amity and hostility are the forms in which the principles of unity and diversity are directly manifested within the social life of mankind. 4. Consonant, dissonant, synaidon, diaidanon, diaidon, means literally singing together or singing apart. There has been much learned attention devoted to the state of musical practice and terminology in Heraclitus' day, and it has been emphatically denied that harmonie in 528 and in 530 can refer to the harmony or concord of several notes struck or sung together, like chords in unison. But in any case, the musical antithesis, following as it does here upon coming together, disagreeing, must be significantly related to the harmony or attunement of the lyre in 528. Since the latter is precisely said to agree in variance with itself. I leave it to historians of Greek music to decide, if they can, what forms of consonance and dissonance Heraclitus may have had in mind. There are several obvious applications. The string of the lyre may sound either in agreement with one another or out of tune. The singer himself may sing either in harmony or in discord with his instrument, and several unaccompanied human voices may sing together with or without a desired accord. Music is a strikingly specific instance of unity and diversity, and we may ask what accounts for this special role of music for Heraclitus. There is no doubt of the privileged status enjoyed by music and the lyre in the aristocratic culture of archaic Greece. Think of the scene in Iliad 9, where Agamemnon's ambassadors find Achilles in his hut singing to the lyre. And the formal patterns of Greek music were regarded as and we soldier on. Music is a strikingly specific instance of unity and diversity, and we may ask what accounts for this special role of music for Heraclitus. There is no doubt of the privileged status enjoyed by music and the lyre in the aristocratic culture of archaic Greek. Think of the scene in Iliad 9 where Agamemnon's ambassador find Achilles in his hut singing to the lyre. And the formal patterns of Greek music were regarded as familiar examples of a unity and agreement that requires as its basis an objective diversity of sounds and tones. This is the thought which Aristotle, following Plato, ascribes to Heraclitus in 525 D8. But I suspect that Heraclitus was also influenced by the kind of Pythagorean speculation concerning the musical numbers and the cosmic role of harmonic ratios that is reflected in the fragments of Philolaus. For if we see in Heraclitus' development of the theme of musical harmony a reaction to Pythagorean ideas, there will be a direct connection between this emphasis on music and his conception of cosmic order in terms of measures and proportion, logos. From all things one and from one thing all, as a final determination of the concept of graspings, Heraclitus here names the themes of unity and plurality which dominate the fragment and characterize his thought throughout. It is easy, in parenthesis, it is easy to imagine these words as a closure for the book, or at least as closing the positive statement of a doctrine. They would thus form a ring pattern with all things are in one. In 26. However, Heraclitus does not refer to plurality as such, pola, many, but to a plurality that is total and all-inclusive, panta, all things. It is not the numerical contrast between the one and the many that is in the focus of concern, but the world-constituting antithesis between unity and totality, the one and the all. Since this final chiastic pairing of antithetical terms provide a kind of summary for all that has gone before, any elaborate commentary would be repetitious. I call attention only to the dynamic, emergic form of the contrast x out of y and y out of x. In cognitive terms, we might understand that these two movements as alternating phases of synthesis and analysis, the seeing together and seeing apart, which characterize intelligence in general, and the understanding of opposites in particular. But beyond this dialectical structure of cognition, there is surely some reference to the monism expressed in 36. All things are one, and the reciprocal movement from pluralized totality, panta, to unity, hen, and back again recalls the exchange of all things, ta panta, for fire and fire for all things in 490. Whatever interpretation fits the universal exchange for fire must also apply somehow to the alternation between all things and one. I have given my reasons for finding a Heraclitean allusion to some vast cosmic cycle involving the emergence of the world order from fire and its reabsorption into the same principle as in the pattern of Stoic ekpyrosis. At the very last, the turnings, tropai, of fire in 38 will imply a succession of cosmic seasons marked by the prevalence of fire at one extreme and its withdrawal to some minimum position in the opposite phase, like the sun at winter solstice. On either reading, the alternation of one and all things in 124 will correspond to the kindling and quenching of cosmic fire in 38. The history of early Greek philosophy suggests an obvious parallel in the cosmic cycle of Empedocles, described in terms of that echo 124. Other parallels do not require a cycle of cosmogony and world destruction. Thus, in the Milesian pattern of apokrisis, or separating out, all things are separated from the apeiron, or from the boundless air. And this process of dispersion must be continually balanced by movement of contraction and condensation. Hence, the physical interpretation of one thing from all things from one, will include, but need not to be limited to a cycle of alternating cosmic periods. The abstract form of the antithesis excludes any univocal reference to such a cosmic pattern. That pattern would serve, like conflict and amity, musical accord and dissonance, as a paradigm of the unity in opposition manifested by every system of rational structure. The kindling and quenching of cosmic fire, mirrored in the alternation of day and night, summer and winter, is of significance for Heraclitus, because it reveals the same pattern as the alternation of waking and sleeping, youth and age, life and death, satiety and hunger. It is this general pattern of unity whose formal structure is articulated by the graspings of 124. By the way, Kala. It is this general pattern of unity whose formal structure is articulated by the grasping of 124. By way of conclusion, I offer a paraphrase of 124 that states that more fully the thought that Heraclitus has deliberately schematized in his elliptical style. We are now, this is very important, you might take out page 286. Here comes grasping. That is to say, groups holding together, apprehensions bringing things together. These are wholes and not wholes. They characterize a system which is convergent, divergent, structured by cooperation and by conflict. This system is consonant, dissonant, held together by harmony and discord alike. From all its components, a unity emerges, and from this unity, all things emerge. 125. Theophrastus. The fairest order of the world, the most beautiful cosmos, says Heraclitus, is a heap of random sweepings. End of quote. Since even the text of Theophrastus is badly preserved, there is no hope of recovering the original passage which he cites. At least the play on cosmos, adornment and word order must belong to Heraclitus. And some reference to random collection must also be authentic if the quotation is to have any point in Theophrastus' context. The implied production of the fairest celestial arrangements from the random assortments of refuse would be a striking illustration of the paradoxical connections of opposite. Beyond this, any interpretation must be a conjecture. My best guess at Heraclitus' point is that the structure of the universal system described in 123 and 124 is so strict and so all-pervasive that chance and providence must coincide. Any random arrangement of material, any arbitrary sample of human life, or evidence from nature must exhibit the same pattern and illustrate the same plan. Gnome. This thought would not be too removed from Aristotle's comment on the anecdote about the visitors who came to meet Heraclitus, but hesitated to enter when they found him warming himself at the kitchen fire. Seeing them at the door, he called out, "Enter with confidence, for here too there are gods." Citing this story in justification of his study of structure of animals, great and small, Aristotle remarks, In all these things there is some element of nature and beauty. And now I enter Appendixes 1. And these are dubious quotations from Heraclitus. So you could say this is like a past extra thing. So, Appendix 1, and we start. I translate here for the sake of completeness the 8 fragments listed as genuine but deals, but not excluded in my own translation and commentary. Reasons for omission differ from case to case. In the case of 2 citations from Iamblichus, the situation is rather similar. We seem to have a term quoted without any reliable indication of the original context. I have included a comparable quotation from Iamblichus among the fragments proper, since it fits plausibly into the context provided by other fragments. Many editors have accepted D49 as a genuine quotation, but I can only see it as a thinly disguised paraphrase of the river fragments, modeled on the contradictory form of 118, and the influence of influenced by the thought of 92. We are and are not alive. The text of D4 is in the class by itself, preserved in Latin by Albertus Magnus in the 13th century AD. With no hint of a Greek source, it seems nonetheless to preserve a Heraclitean kernel, and I've used it with some hesitation in the commentary on 520 to 522. I should add, among the fragments included in my text and commentary, there are at least 2 of doubtful authenticity. I will not mention all the small material. And I will go to Appendix 2. From the life of Heraclitus in Diogenes Laertius. This is called Appendix 2, Doxographic Reports. Following an epitome from Theophrastus, Opinions of the Natural Philosophers, begins like this. In general, his opinions are these: all things are composed out of fire and dissolved into it. Everything takes place according to fate, and things are harmoniously fitted together by the transformation of opposites. Also, all things are full of souls, psyche, and divine spirits, daimones. He discussed all the phenomena which occur in the cosmos, and said the sun is the size it appears. Another saying of this: you will not find out the limits of the soul by going, even if you travel over every way, so deep is its logos. And he said that conceit is a sacred disease, epilepsy, and seeing is being deceived. His book contains some brilliant clear passages which even the dullest can easily understand, and hence get some spiritual enrichment. The brevity and density, Barrow's weight of his style, are incomparable. In detail, his doctrines are these. Fire is an elementary principle, stoicheion, and all things are an exchange for fire, produced by rarefication and condensation. But he does not expound this clearly. Everything occurs through opposition, and the whole world flows like a river. But the universe is finite, and there is one world. It is generated from fire and ignited again in a conflagration according to certain cycles, alternating for all times. This takes place in accordance with fate. Of opposites, the one leading to generation is called war and conflict, and the one leading to conflagration is called ekpyrosis, is called agreement and peace. Change is a way up and down, and through this the world is produced. And if you go to 9, as fire thickens it becomes moist, and as it condenses it becomes water, and water thickens and turns into earth, and this is the way down. But in turn the earth dissolves, and from it water arises, and from water everything else. Since he derives almost everything from the exhalation, anaphymiasis, out of the sea, and this is the way up. Now exhalations arise from both earth and sea, some of them bright and pure, others dark. Fire is augmented by the bright exhalation, moisture by the other ones. He does not indicate what the surrounding heaven, to perichon, is like, but it is there a certain boughs, scaphi, turned over with the hollow part facing us, and bright exhalation gather together in these and produce flames, which are the heavenly bodies. I think I continue in the next episode with page 291. I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant evening. Bye bye.